Hi, this is Nicole, and I'm responding to this week's discussion post. Um, in order to really respond to the materials we've covered, I have to do a little bit of self-disclosure. I am obviously a white female, and I come from a pretty privileged background. My dad worked for the Foreign Service, so I was afforded, the opportunity to travel, um, get a good educational background, and as a kid growing up, I felt like this meant I owed the world something, that, my circumstances meant I had to be happy and excited about life. Um, Certainly in the survey we took, for me, it said in U.S. society, many resources will be offered to you whether or not you want them or ask for them. It will support you to get the things required to have what the society considers a good life simply because of your race. And so, as a kid growing up, here I was being handed all these resources that I felt I hadn't asked for or earned, and that meant that I owed the world something. And part of me was pretty resentful about that because I hadn't asked for it, and I felt like I, wasn't morally worthy of these resources and support because I hadn't earned them. I wasn't entitled to these things. And perhaps part of what has driven me to want to help change the world and, go into social work is because of the guilt that I had that I was given these resources that I hadn't earned. And I wanted to do something that would make it seem that, I did deserve them. Yes, that I am a female, so there is some gender bias in our society, obviously, but I haven't really encountered any major obstacles myself. Um, but it's taken me a long time to come to terms with the fact that just because of my circumstances, that doesn't mean that I'm a good or bad person. Just as, someone who comes from a lower class family who's a minority, that doesn't automatically deem them a bad or a good person. And we're so quick to judge based on outside circumstances, but it's what we do with our circumstances that determine our worth, in my opinion. Um, so, uh, I certainly agree with Dr. Wheeler that as social workers, our job mandates action. You know, this is what I want to do. I want to help create a change. I want to help bring about um, some of these ideals and make them realities. I want to help bring about equity and have people see that whatever our race or economic background, that is not what earns our respect. It's how we act. I like that quote that says, it's not it that our character is defined by what we do when other people aren't looking. You know, that I think is more important than just what our class is, our nationality, or whatever the case may be that makes someone different from me. Um, it's funny because reading this week's materials as well as seeing the lecture, and actually most of the material we've covered this semester, a lot of it is almost philosophical in nature. Determining what is social justice, what is equality, equity. How do we decide? How do we see racism in this country? Um, what is the reality of our social justice system or our educational system? And I would argue that part of our job as social workers is to be philosophical about these things, is to dream of how to change and make changes, a reality for the world. Um, because I think, often the ideas or ideals that people hold are pretty different from the reality of the situation. But without dreamers, without people who want to see things change, then there aren't going to be any changes. Um, and this is, to me, what the understanding of real freedom and courage means, and how we get our heroes. And maybe it's naive to imagine that, that we can make the world a bit better just as an individual, but I think that, our history has documented that individuals can help make changes, and, that maybe I am naive to think in terms of things like hope and love and forgiveness, but, I remember when I first read the book Lord of the Flies, and I was pretty torn apart for a while, having had my idea of the basic good of humanity kind of ripped to shreds. It took me a while to kind of come to terms with the idea that I don't know that humans are good or bad at heart. I think it's just our understanding or lack thereof. It's that we all are brought up with certain values, certain systems that differ based on, any of these different classes of economics or race or nationality, religion, any of these things that make it into us and versus them. I like, again, the quote by Herbert Spencer, which says, "There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation." And I think that this is what a lot of the materials that we've covered demonstrate, is that by closing off our minds, by having contempt, by judging others based on their appearance or their background or whatever the case may be, this is where we are led to many of our difficulties and even just reading that article about, the white privilege, how we're brought to, as a white person, how I'm brought up to kind of disregard all the privileges that are thrown at me. I think that's why education is the most important thing to me, that I can help maybe bring an awareness to other people to show them that maybe our ideals and dreams don't have to be just left to our imagination. Maybe we can help make some of that a reality. And again, maybe that's, pretty naive of me to say, but without that sense of hope, then this task is too overwhelming. There is too much change that needs to be brought about. This is why, though, that education is kind of the core of my belief in helping create this change, because it's through that awareness and that understanding that we can create compassion, and that we can start to change people's views so that they don't see someone who's different from them as necessarily bad. I think about like when 9/11 happened, and so many people in this country viewed anyone who was Muslim as the enemy, and that's where the real dangers come in, is when we see the actions of a few as a representation of many. I think that perhaps some of the privileges that I've been afforded, the cultures I've managed to explore, were given to me in order that I could help spread awareness and understanding, and encourage people to look beyond what they've been taught. So, for me, with becoming a social worker, I do want to help bring about, social justice and social action. I have to acknowledge that, I didn't ask for the hand that I was dealt, whether I see it as good or bad, but this is what I have. So can I use that to continue to help others? Can I use it to show that, there doesn't necessarily have to just be an us and them? That maybe that's too idealistic. I think that maybe it's just in our human nature to draw lines between us. But at least I can do my part to help enlarge people's understanding, and perhaps even enlarge their hearts a little as well, if that isn't too philosophical and idealistic. But that's what I can hope. So that's all.